I spent the last 4.5 weeks of my life watching every available full 90-minute match from Arsenal's 03-04 Invincible season to answer one question: how good were they really? Because everyone knows the Invincibles are special, we all know the record, we all know the names, but I wanted to know what this team actually felt like over a full season, not just in highlight clips. I was born in 1998, so by the time I properly got into football, that Arsenal team was already history. I'd seen the highlights, I'd seen the stories, and as an Arsenal fan I obviously knew how legendary they were. But I'd never actually sat down and experienced the season properly. Full matches, full context, no nostalgia edits. So I tracked down all the matches from the 38-game league season, watched them all and then took notes down on everything. The patterns, the partnerships, the moments, the players. And by the end of this video I'll be unlocking my awards for Best Goal of the Season, Best Match of the Season, and Player of the Season. But after watching this whole season back, one thing became obvious immediately. At one point I looked back at my notes and one page literally just said, Henry. No tactics, no deep analysis, just Henry. And honestly, looking back at my notes for the last 4.5 weeks, that might have just been the most accurate one that I wrote. Because I understood the hype before, of course I did. I'd seen the goals, the compilations, the iconic moments. But watching Thierry Henry in full matches is completely different. Highlights just show you the moments. Full matches show you the fear. Every time he picked the ball up, defenders looked nervous. He could start wide left, drive inside, spin in behind, combine centrally, or just carry the ball 30 yards and make it look easy. And what really stood out to me is he wasn't just a finisher, he was the entire threat. He scored, he created, he'd stretch teams, and he'd put that panic into defenders before he'd even do anything. And after watching the season back fully, I completely understand why people regard him as the greatest Premier League player ever. But this team wasn't just carried by Thierry Henry, and that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned during this. Yes, Henry was a star obviously, but if you remember the Invincibles as just Henry, and 10 other players watching him do his work, you're missing out on what made them so special. Because trust me, this team had threats from everywhere. Pires was massive, Bergkamp was massive, Vieira's presence in the midfield was huge, and Ashley Cole down that left flank was massively important. I think a lot of Arsenal fans might have forgotten that or have chosen to forget that. That's what stood out to me when I watched this season as a whole. It wasn't the individual players, but it was how well they gelled together. If Henry didn't hurt you, Pires would drift into space. If Pires didn't, Bergkamp would unlock you. If the move recycled, Cole was already flying forward again. The team had stars, but most importantly, it had connections. And nowhere was that clearer than on the left-hand side. The chemistry between Ashley Cole, Robert Pires, and Thierry Henry was ridiculous. And it worked because they all attacked different spaces. Cole gave them width. Pires drifted inside. Henry started left and then attacked centrally. So defenders were constantly being asked different questions, often at the same time. Cole was aggressive with his overlaps and got into genuinely dangerous positions. Pires wasn't a traditional touchline winger. He moved into central pockets, linked play, and arrived in areas that made him a goal threat, as well as a creator. And Henry just made the whole thing deadly. That left-hand side felt like a cheat code. Cole overlaps, Pires comes inside, Henry bends the defensive line, and suddenly, the opposition has too many decisions to make at once. That's one of the things that surprised me the most. A lot of it still looks modern now. The rotations, the overloads, the wide players coming inside, the fullbacks providing width. When I was watching it, it didn't feel old. It felt ahead of its time. And then there's the Henry and Bergkamp partnership, which I probably appreciated most watching this full season back. Because they weren't a traditional front two. They were like two completely different solutions to the same problem. Henry was chaos and Bergkamp was control. Henry wanted space in behind. Bergkamp wanted space between the lines. Henry drifted left and then attacked the box. Bergkamp stayed deeper, more central, and stitched everything together. And that made them horrible to defend. Because if you tracked Henry, Bergkamp had room. If you stepped to Bergkamp, Henry was already spinning in behind. If you sat deep, Arsenal could combine around you. If you pushed up, Henry would kill you. They complemented each other perfectly. Not because they were similar, but because they weren't. Another thing that I noticed was how stable the team was. Not rigid, but stable. There was a real backbone to them. Lehmann behind a mostly consistent back four. Vieira setting the tone in the midfield. A core group of players who completely understood their role. And underneath all the flair and all the beautiful football, there was actually a lot of structure. That's what great teams usually have. Not just talent, not just vibes, clarity. Everyone in the team understood their roles. And maybe that was my biggest takeaway from watching the Invincibles. They weren't unbeatable because they blew teams away every single week. They were unbeatable because they had so many different ways to hurt you. Some games were fluid and beautiful, some were scrappy, some were won by brilliance, and some were won by patience. But across it all, there was always this feeling that whatever question got thrown to Arsenal, they always had the answer, and that's what made them so special. So it's time now to finally unlock the awards. For the best match of the season, I'm going for Arsenal versus Liverpool when they beat them 4-2 at Highbury. The reason behind it is, during that time Arsenal had just been dumped out of the FA Cup and the Champions League, so it looked like the wheels were falling off, and then Arsenal responded with that result. Arsenal went into that game under real pressure, and it looked like the title race could slip up as well, but then Henry just took over. It turned into a complete individual masterclass. Goals, movement, control of the game, everything. And that's why I think this match sums up the Invincibles perfectly. Because when they needed something big, in a big moment against a top team, they had that individual brilliance of a player who could turn a game on its head. For the best goal, I'm going with Thierry Henry against Liverpool. I know it might sound a bit predictable, but it's Henry. Because that goal feels like Thierry Henry in one moment. He picks up the ball on the halfway line, drives forward, glides past a few defenders, and then just hits them with a little trademark, making it unfair for everyone else. Power, elegance, balance, inevitability, it's just Thierry Henry. And for the player of the season, drum rolls, you're going to know who it is already, it's Thierry Henry. I know it's the least surprising reveal of all time, but after watching the season back in full, there was no other answer. He felt like the player most capable of deciding any match in any moment against any team. Not just because of the goals, not just because of the assists, but because of the fear he created. Someone who deserves a special mention is Robert Pires. If it wasn't for Henry, Robert Pires would have won this award. He was easily the second best player in this team and provided the team with so much. From goals, assists, and also creating space for Thierry Henry. I was surprised by how brilliant he was, because I've not really seen much of him. And for that, he deserves a special mention. So after finally sitting down and experiencing this full season, I understand it now. Not just the record, not just the nostalgia. I understand now why this team still feels mythical. Because they weren't just unbeaten. They were balanced, intelligent, fluid, and adaptable. When they needed something special, they had Thierry Henry. Thank you so much for watching. If you want, I can do this again with another iconic team or amazing season. So if there's another one that you want me to watch, just leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this one, please subscribe.